So welcome to Ember.js New York City, the April edition. Good to have you all out tonight. My name is Luke Milia. I organize this meetup. Basically, we've got a series of lightning talks and demos tonight, followed by a couple of talks, a couple of longer talks, one by Erik Bryn and one by, or maybe two by Erik Bryn perhaps, and one by Andy Leeper. And so it should be a great night, and then we are going to have drinks afterwards for those who are interested in coming out at a bar not too far away. What I'd like to do is just open the floor to announcements from anybody who's not giving a lightning talk, hiring, interesting events, anything that people want to share with the group. So, open the floor.
Yeah, go ahead. So, I'm working Sport 195. We're trying to empower the world through sports. So, we're hiring full stack and front-end engineers. So, all who's interested, come to me.
Cool. And do you guys use Ember in your stack?
We don't, but it's open to the possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody came on and they want to use Ember, you'd be game. All right.
Sure. Just convince me.
Sounds good. Cool. Anybody else? Okay, cool. So a couple of sponsors to thank. We are here by the good graces of Pivotal Labs. This is their space. For those of you who don't know, Pivotal is a consultancy with offices here in New York, in San Francisco, in Boulder, and a couple of cities I'm probably forgetting. Great agile consultancy, lots of Rails work, iOS stuff, other stuff. If you have ever thought about working for a consultancy and are looking, you should talk to Micah Young, who's in the back right here. Micah is a pivot, as they're called here, and is also my brother-in-law, so I can vouch for him. He's a good guy. Keep it in the family. The other sponsor tonight is my company is Yap, and I wanted to mention something about Yap. Yap has a product that's designed for regular folks to create mobile applications. So no designer tech skills necessary. Visit an Ember app on the web, have an awesome experience, create an app, publish to iOS and Android apps, which are also powered by Ember. So if you guys have the app for the event tonight, you're holding Ember in your hands, which is pretty cool. Yap's recently started doing some consulting as well, specifically around Ember.js. So if that's something where we can be helpful to you or your company, feel free to reach out to me. Also, as most of you know, we've been running Hacker Hours, which is a more informally programmed, or not programmed at all, segment every 2 weeks, which is mostly for people to come and help mentor people, get help, hack on interesting Ember stuff. We've been hosting that at two spaces, the space from Simple Reach, thank you guys for hosting, and from Red Rover HQ. And I believe that the next one is this coming Tuesday night at Red Rover HQ. It's not up on the meetup yet, but as soon as I have confirmation from Excel, who organizes the Hacker Hours, I'll get that up there as well. The next meetup, monthly meetup, is May 23rd. Speaker is TBD, so if you have something you'd like to present, talk to me. We'd love to get you on the program. And with that, we're going to start off our lightning talks. And our first speaker tonight is out of order. We had a little bit of AV mix up, so we're going to call an audible and have Pawan Podila give a talk on a NetTuts Ember tutorial that he has prepared. It's going to teach us a few things and give us a look at what that's going to look like. So thank you for joining us, Pawan.
Okay. Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Pawan Podila. And I think in the past 7 years I've been in New York, I've heard 10 different pronunciations of my name. So one of them is Pawan, so you can probably stick to that. I started off on a fairly traditional software path. Did 5 years of Java, Eclipse, plugins, RCP. Anyone? No one? Then did about 6 years of .NET and WPF, wrote a book during the time. And the past 2.5 years, I've been doing a lot of Node.js, iOS, and Ruby. And it's almost like I've been let out of an enterprise cage, where I can finally come out and smell the flowers and be like regular folks. So it's fun, actually. I'm enjoying a lot over here, and Ember.js definitely adds to my list of things I explore. But in the past few months, I've also taken on a side project, which is to write some articles for NetTuts. It's an online web development magazine which teaches you on varieties of web development topics. And I've been writing a few articles over there. And recently, about a month back, I created a video course for them for Ember.js, using some of the latest JavaScript technologies like Node.js, MongoDB, Ember.js, and so on. So that's pretty much my topic for the talk today. I'm going to talk about what this tutorial is, and I'll invite you to take a further look at that. All right. Unfortunately, OK, it looks good. So this is a end-to-end app powered by Express.js and MongoDB on the backend, and Ember.js doing all the client-side work. So this is pretty much the tech stack that we have, and I'm showing you a few screenshots over here. And a lot of Ember.js concepts that get covered in this tutorial, which should go online probably in a month, not less than a month maybe. They're still doing the post-production work right now, so it should go up with all those jingles and everything. So it should be out very soon. So some of the things that I cover in the course are like route redirects, like how do you go from one route to the other, views talking to the controller, jQuery UI in the views, handlebar helpers, how to create your own and register them with the Ember engine, and organizing templates using partials. There are a few more actually, but this is just the top file list, I would say. So instead of just showing you screenshots, I'll give you a short demo of what the app actually looks like. It's not the one. That's the one. All right, so this is the app, and there are 3 tabs at the top. You have the product, sales, and the search tab. And what we're doing over here is creating an analytics dashboard for an e-commerce company called NTN. And during the course, I talk about what NTN needs and how we are creating these different tabs, what kind of data they want to see, and so on. So you have the products tab, which gives you breakdown by the products. On the sales tab, I think I have some issues over here. Let's see if that works. That is unfortunate. But it's Ember, so I can do this. Routes, right? Yeah. So the sales tab basically gives you a live breakdown, live filtering of the sales performance. So you can change your sliders, and it gives you a live update on the chart on the right. So this is making call through Ember data, getting the data, and showing the data onto the client. There's a chart view on the right, which listens to changes happening on the route data. And when that changes, it renders itself with a new chart. You can also pick some colors, and it gives you products which were sold with that color. And finally, since I can't even click that, I'm going to use some Ember magic and go to the search tab, wherein you can see the details of a product. So you can look up a product, let's say my favorite laptop, and pretty highly reviewed. So that's the one I'll buy probably. So here you can see some details of the product, and this is all happening through Ember data, jQuery views, talking to controllers, and so on. So as you can see, there are a lot of charts in this app, and we'll be building a lot of them. So instead of creating each of these charts individually, I created a custom view called the base chart view. And instead of me talking about it, I'll play a short clip from the video course, which talks about the base chart view. We'll go back to the presentation. Hopefully it'll work. Audio. Can I check audio here? Good enough? Yeah? I just heard one, actually. Yeah, that's good enough. All right, let's roll.
Ember view, which will act as our base chart view, that will listen to the events happening on the view and rendering only when the data is there.
I hope you like my voice.
So let me give you a schematic representation of how the base chart is. So there are 2 layers over here. One is the view, and the other is the Ember.js framework. The view is our base chart. So when the view is inserted into the DOM, we need to insert an element file. This will then call the create chart method and create the D3 chart. Just the container of the chart, not filling it with data. And once that's done, we will set the underscore element ready If you can file for a base chart view,
Just a few more seconds.
JavaScript exposure,
I use require.js throughout the app, so you can learn about that too.
just to add a dependencies, in this case the app. And now I can create a base chart view, which will be extending. Now instead of using the entire word Ember, you can also use EM, which is the exploration. So that's a nice
All right, so that's a short preview of what the tutorial actually has. There are about 12 lessons in all and goes through all the way from end to end. So you'll start off by creating the MongoDB server, configuring it, writing some seed data script to actually put some data into that, and hosting the whole thing through Express Web Server. Coming on to the client, we'll have the Ember.js, some routes, Ember data to fetch all the data from the back end, and a lot of nice stuff. So I hope you like it, and it should go out pretty soon, maybe in a week or so. I'll send out the links to the Ember.js meetup, and you guys can take a look at that. I'll also show you one short code walkthrough. So just to show you that it's all real, I'm not just faking it with the video. Let's go back here. So this is one of the views, which is the filter view you saw on the sales tab, where you had the sliders and the select boxes. So at the high level, what we're doing here is listening to the, the content loaded and the element ready properties, similar to the base chart view. Once ready is set, which is a computer property, it goes and does the setup. So this observes the ready property, does the setup with all the sliders, and sets up the data coming from the back end. And finally, it also listens to the control changes. So over here, it'll listen to these events, the slide stop and the change events, and then finally notify the filter change. Notify filter change actually talks to the controller. So here you're picking up the data from the filters and finally talking to the controller. So there are a few ways to actually have this communication. You can either fire an event, or you can directly call the method on the controller itself. So here I chose to go the direct route. Hey, controller, just call this. So I'm assuming the controller already satisfies the contract of having a method exposed called fetch sales with this filter as the input. So this goes in and gets the data. And let me show you the sales. So here you have the filter sales chart view, which is listening to the results property on the controller. So the controller will actually get the data and put that in the results. And this is bound to that. So when that comes through, it will render the chart for you. So this is the basic communication. Your events are flowing up, data is flowing down, exactly what Luke spoke about in the last meetup. And that's the one view I wanted to talk about. A lot more, but this is where I'll leave it. I don't want to take away all the thunder from the course. One more thing I want to add is I have 3 memberships I can give away. That's what my editor has promised me at least. So if you can tweet me why you like Ember.js, I'll make sure you get the subscription. Well, go back here. I guess that's it. Any questions? All right, thanks everyone. Oh, sorry, one question.
What are you using to connect this MongoDB?
So I use Mongoose ORM, which is, oh, sorry. So his question was what library I use. What library? Yeah, so what library do I use to connect to MongoDB? So I use Mongoose, which is an ORM library for the Node.js. It's a module on Node.js. You can install your NPM and then connect directly to MongoDB. It simplifies some of the connection handling and requesting data from it. Okay.
Any other questions for Pawan? All right. Hey, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
We're going to have Steph you up next. A couple of announcements for those of you who don't know. If you want to get on Wi-Fi here, it's Pivotal Guest. The password is go to Pivotal, G-O, the number 2, Pivotal. And restrooms are back there by the exit sign, just past the exit sign. So next up, we're lucky to have one of the Ember core team members, Stefan Penner, to tell us about what's new in Ember.js RC3, which was released, I guess, was it on Sunday?
It was released between Friday and Sunday.
It was if anybody If anybody watched Steph's commits during over last weekend, it was an absolute storm of activity.
Of sadness.
Which I don't think, it didn't include a whole lot of sleep, but there was something beautiful on the end of it.
Awesome. I'm Steph. I'm going to keep this one short because we got a bunch of good talks coming. So I'm just going to basically go through the blog post, which I wrote. But if you guys have questions about any of the points, feel free to ask. Lots of the work was done by Erik, who is sitting right there. So we can turn this into a little bit of a discussion. And we'll time box it at 10 minutes if we even get that far. So on the path to 1.0, we want to make Ember very solid, very consistent, very fast. We have essentially frozen the API so that there's no more API churn. Who here was using Ember before 1.0? Who survived? Yeah. We should have like we need a T-shirt, but we also need to maybe have like a memorial service for our friends that we lost.
I know a lot of people feel it.
Yeah. Remembrance of some sort, right? Remember all those we lost. Anyways, so as we approach 1.0, our focus is really just to continue to solidify the API, to fix bugs, and to improve performance. So the first point here was brought up was performance. So there's a series of performance improvements that have happened in Ember and are going to continue to happen in Ember. Basically, every step in performance we make is unlocking another door that we can make an even more substantial impact. These were the main points of performance. Likely Erik will talk about some other points later today because he was very involved with that. So basically, since RC2 has landed, if we are inserting a series of adjacent views, we now insert them all at once rather than piecemeal. This should help. Hey, you made it. Amazing. So rather than inserting each one of these views piecemeal, we basically bulk them up and insert them all at once. This should reduce sort of the browser churn and make rendering container views much quicker. Collection views much quicker. One of the next points is object deletion is now async. So please correct me if I'm wrong, Erik, but basically object deletion was causing some churn in sort of the normal run loop. So rather than deleting objects haphazardly, we mark them for deletion, and at the very end, at a specific point in the run loop, we basically go and delete them all. This really helps when you're deleting a large graph of things and improves performance. And during initial rendering, the number of objects created has been drastically reduced, which cuts down initial rendering for large complex views dramatically. Mr. Bryn, do you have a number of some sort for that? Numbers? No?
We don't use numbers in performance.
Seems good. For the viewers back home, a performance is a game of pin the tail on a donkey. That is from Erik Bryn. I hope it's not actually that. Anyway, so another big point that many people have felt is sort of the pain of testing in Ember. Turns out Ember actually has some fantastic qualities to make testing really easy. We try to reduce coupling as much as possible by providing a container, reduce global coupling. But when doing integration tests, this was quite painful when it was kind of hard to restart your app in a fresh state. So there's been work done in app reset to try and correctly clean up your application in your tests. So in your integration tests, you can click app reset, and it will basically tear down all the state of your application and spin it back up again. So your integration tests should not collide with each other. Should not. Initial work has been done on an Ember testing package, which tries to bring some nice helpers to the testing ecosystem. One of which is very important, is testing async is sometimes a big pain. And if you test your application that normally is async, meaning something will happen in the future, if you test this in a way that it's not async, you're going to have bugs down the road because, well, it's not running async in your tests. So rather than trying to fake asynchrony, we are trying to embrace asynchrony in our tests. So there's some work being done to use promises to basically have you visit. There's nothing about testing. I didn't say anything. thanks to Stanley Stewart, Luke Melia, and Erik Bryn, we now have builds.ember.js.com. Every successful Travis build now gets pushed to Ember, including all the tag releases. This makes it very easy to quickly prototype something in JSBin or JSFiddle, or even submit a bug report. builds.ember.js.com/ember-latest will always give you the latest successful build. So that's quite useful when you just want to see what's new on master, you're testing a bug against master. This is kind of neat. Rather than having to type the longhand of Ember text field, Ember checkbox, Ember text area, there's now input text area and input type checkbox helpers, just to get rid of this extra boilerplate that exists. We've also done a massive job at improving the documentation. If you guys find missing docs, please submit a fix or just point them out and they'll get fixed. But this should hopefully help people learning or just finding new methods they've never seen before, which happens to me all the time. Like we were finding today, there's a new feature I didn't know about, not documented though. Anyway, so that's the end of the quick what's new in RC3. Do you guys have any specific questions? If not, we can.
Yeah, we just tried upgrading the other day and we found a problem with the tear down on a controller in the router. So if you're in a router and you're adding state to a controller in the, like, say, setup, and then tearing that down in the exit, the controller is already destroyed, so you can't, like, full set on the controller. Do you have any ideas for how to get around that?
Seems bad. Talk to me afterwards. If we have an exact use case, I'm sure we can figure something out. Just speaking hypothetically, it's hard to pin the tail on the donkey. Any other questions?
There are like 190 people in tickets now. There are a lot of monsters like 4
Any idea on game plan? So there's a series of people that are basically triaging these things from all over the place. People are, one of the big pain points we've been having is we've been making improvements, breaking older browsers. That was one of the pain points when I was working on RC3 was testing from, basically I had like 4 browser stack windows open and very painful. Anyway, so there's a few people that have sort of championed this and they are doing this on a regular basis, and there's a script that will be running nightly to run against all the browsers that we support to sort of prevent regressions. That's one category, because there's a lot of issues that come in. This is broken in Opera or some browser that no one uses. There's no visibility. It's really hard to go and every single commit that you make, test it in like 20 or 30 browsers. That is totally unreasonable. So hopefully this will help with those problems. The next phase is like there's a series of documentation issues. They're slowly being whittled down. And other issues, they're just being triaged based on the ability to fix them in a short period of time and who's available, who has the bandwidth. Did that answer your question? Sure, a little bit, kind of. Something that is interesting, though, since RC2, we've had a huge influx in contributors, which is really nice. It's easing the load, and it's very important. So the more people that can contribute, the faster we can fix these bugs, and the better everyone's life gets. Everyone's good? Awesome. That's it.
Cool. Thanks, Steph. Awesome. Also wanted to mention, in addition to the testing stuff that that Erik Bryn's cousin is going to talk about later, and that Steph alluded to. There's also Katie Genglers here today, who's done a bunch of Ember testing work as well. So if you want to pick her brain, I'm sure you can do that too. So I'm excited to welcome back to the Ember NYC meetup stage, Christopher C. Chris runs a group at McGraw-Hill Education called McGraw-Hill Education Labs, which is a R&D group. And MHE Labs has been one of the biggest supporters of Ember from the early days. Has worked closely with Yehuda and Tom and the rest of the team at Tilde to push various parts of Ember and Ember data, over various humps in the service of some of the projects at MHE Labs. So I know everyone in the community is grateful for that contribution. And he's here to talk to us tonight about a really cool JavaScript framework called Oasis.
Great. I'm going to talk to you guys about Oasis in the reverse order. I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you why it matters later. It's a little bit of a risk I'm taking. This is the first library that we have essentially sponsored. It's on GitHub right now. Oasis.js.com is the one-page landing site. It's done by Yehuda and Tom at Tilde, and it's continued Tilde doing some additional work since Yehuda and Tom has kind of got the first version 1.0 out. And it is not an Ember project, and I'll explain that in a second why. But I'll talk about what it does now, because I think by looking at some code and seeing what it does, it will become a little bit clearer why this is not Ember Oasis, but a standalone project. So the basic idea of Oasis is to help you structure communication between multiple untrusted sandboxes. Well, that sounds like a really, really obtuse statement. Let's see if we can unwrap it a little bit more. It uses concept and capability-based security to help you safely expose capability and data to untrusted code, secure the knowledge the sandbox can only communicate through each other and the outside world through capabilities. What am I talking about, right? So I'm just going to ignore the definition. You can get the definition on oasisjs.com, and then hopefully one day this will make sense to you. The basic idea of sandboxes is to basically say that if I have an app, it could be an Ember app, it could be a JavaScript jQuery app, and I want to embed another capability or some kind of widget inside that. And right now, the way to do it, like in WordPress, is to insert a script tag, and then that script tag, it becomes like a comment widget and discuss. But if I were to build something where I want to have a capability, like an app within an app, then I have to decide how I'm going to make sure that I can communicate with that app, but that app can be its own sandbox. So this is an example where I'm creating a new JavaScript file called pingpong.js. It's going to be embedded within a larger app. And then I'm going to create a service called ping service, this is what this app will allow me to communicate to this. And I will then create a consumer on one end. You can look at the code later on. And I can wire it up and send a ping. And on return, it sends a pong. So this is essentially very much just network programming kind of code. What it looks like is something like this. You have a host, which is an application that you're building, and a sandbox, which could be an application you're building as well. It's kind of like a widget. Or it could be someone else's application that you're embedding within your app. And then you essentially create a channel using Oasis, wire it up, and now you can have an event going one way, you have an event going another way. So this is very similar to listening to events within a traditional JavaScript application, or some of the kind of nice semantics and syntax that we can get in Ember to do that within the kind of moving parts within one application. But what's really cool about this is this and that application can be two different things. And if you're dealing with a situation where you want to pair up these kind of responses, so like request responses, we use essentially a promises library. It's called RSP.js. I think it's been mentioned in previous thing. That was actually written for this Oasis.js project. We realized that we have a need to have a request come in a sandbox, and later on, when that sandbox can fulfill that request, it sends back with a resolve using the promises semantics. This all seems fairly abstract. It's like, this is like TCP/IP. You're just creating the networking protocol so that you can do something else. And what you can do, and this is about using promises, and you can also send data, so these actual pings and pongs can actually carry data, such as you bringing the username of your application and the user profile of the person into one of the widgets that sits within your app. You can send some data, such as, I think, Tom, and it will send back, hey, hello, now you have this communication going on here. So this is essentially what's going on. What it uses a concept called iframe sandboxes. So each one of these Oasis components that's sitting within your app, or your app sitting within someone else's app, is essentially an iframe, right? And we're using the HTML5 iframe as a way to give you a very, very clean context. You can embed any library. You can embed Angular, right, to build this sandbox, right? Sure. And then we essentially use the message channel semantics as a way to coordinate the communication. For browsers that don't support message channel, which is some of them, Oasis.js give you a nice API and also the polyfill, so that you can actually treat all of these sandboxes as if they were seamless iframes. And we'll get to that, what that means. And there are things you can pass along, and all this heavy lifting of making sure that it works consistently across browsers done by the library. So this is what Oasis is. The reason why this is important is that if you are Disqus and you're trying to embed your comment app inside multiple blocks, but you don't want that to just be something that doesn't communicate with the app, your WordPress block, you can now use Oasis, and then you need to have the host application implement one end of the Oasis communication channel. You need your sandbox app, the actual Disqus app, to implement the other side. And you have to decide what the protocols are, what are you actually exchanging as far as message is concerned. And now you can send back comment counts or send back the name of the user, user context, all without any REST call. This is all just events going back and forth, messages going back and forth between two apps. If you can imagine in a circumstance,
so there's no network traffic?
no network traffic, it's all just using message channel, which is a network model, but it's within your browser, right? So this is integration in the glass, right? Like what you're seeing, your browser, your DOM, you can actually introspect this stuff when you're in the developer tools. It's actually just communication. I'll show a demo of that, how that looks in a little bit. And if you're a Stripe, this will be very useful, where you can actually have a very safe way of communicating across a boundary about what information I'm giving to the Stripe checkout button or something like that, and create more of a standard doing that. This happens today in a hackish kind of way, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But this will be a much cleaner way of defining this very clear ports, endpoints, and protocol between the communications. Why is McGraw-Hill involved in this? Because it turns out that we have something like this when we're trying to build a learning environment. We want to be able to say, let's say you're looking at an ebook app, which could be built by us or built by someone else, could be a Kindle app, rewritten in HTML5, and I want to know what you have read or have you completed reading something. And then my quiz app would take that event or that data and actually give you a relevant quiz at the relevant level that is in the language that you want to do. And I have a quiz app that have many, many capabilities, but I want to send a message, say, hey, set yourself to these questions or randomize them or put them in place. I can use Oasis as a way to build each one of these sandbox app or have some other developers or use a partner to do that. And then I have this lesson host app, which by the way is written in Ember, to be able to do that. So what we demoed about 2 months ago, not about, it's exactly 2 Ember meetup ago, is that we went to Tilda and say, you have helped us in, worked on Ember, and we have built this app, which is a course builder application where you can drag and drop different types of learning resources and to create different lessons. They're grouped inside topic, they have due dates and when they're made available. This is not really what the student would see, it's what your instructor would see if they're building a course. Each one of these kind of modules is a lesson, it's what we've discussed. And within this lesson, I can have a PDF viewer, right? This is, from Crocodile or something like that. I could have a video player from YouTube. And we're having a lot of trouble getting the libraries imported there, and they don't have their own context. If they were using another library that's not compatible with the way Ember works, then we can't embed that little component. So we'll say, what if we bring the Oasis technology, which gives a clean context for the iframe for each one of these things we're embedding, but then maintaining communication channel in a more explicit way. Now we can, this is the punchline, do something where I can write an Ember app that has its own simplistic context, or I can start bringing other libraries, not just different framework on taste, but also libraries that may be bringing in many different types of capability. Anything you can do on a single page app to submit to Hacker News, you can now include in the lesson that McGraw-Hill is curating together, or your professor using our tools is doing. That's a pretty powerful thing, because once you can do this, you can make Ember a gracious host of any JavaScript that you find or you include. Now, other people like Stripe and Disqus, they're curious about this as a general solution to the problem of sandboxing. Is that if other people start saying Oasis is the way we're going to expose our capability, and we start deciding what are the type of protocols, so your comment app and my comment app can speak the same protocol, maybe have completely different UI, different implementation, different backends, they can now work side by side. That is really interesting. You can now compose Lego blocks of application that has its own context using a network programming model to tie them back together. That's why Oasis has all these low-level constructs, so that you don't have to deal with them. You can think about the high-level semantics or how your apps within your app, or when you start assembling different places together. So what I'm going to demo to you is not necessarily the sandboxing. I don't know exactly how to demo sandboxing. What I'll show to you is what happens when these components interact. So this is actually available at Tilde's a repository. There's a product called conductor.js, which is a slightly high-level library that shows communications between these sandboxes, whereas Oasis is just a sandboxing code. And what happens here, if I go to the example, is that I have the ability to add a video player. This is a YouTube video player. And if I tell the video player that I want you to be a thumbnail, it displays a thumbnail. If I say I want you to show it as an actual player, this is from the host application sending a message. I want you to render yourself as a player. It now switches over and it responds to that message. The code is pretty simple. If this message, then do this, and that's all done in JavaScript. But what's really cool about this is that this video, which is in a different size here, is now being played. At the end of the playback, it sends back a message, which is, I have just completed playback. I have no idea what to do. This little rate this Super Bowl ad is actually a completely separate card. So this could be written by a different person, right? So this was just a very simple multiple choice kind of application. But the orchestration, the conducting, right, between this YouTube player and the message that I've completed playback and therefore go to the next step, which is show a rating utility, is all done using network programming. And they can be nested, and they can respond to it. What's really cool is that as a host application, you can actually see all the messages, like listening to a Wi-Fi network and see what people are doing. You can actually wiretap into all the communication, all the message pings and the pounds that it's sent. And this gives you analytic opportunity, gives you ability to respond to events that's going on. So it's mind-blowingly cool, but it's basically just applying network programming concepts that people have been doing to the world of front-end programming, which is a mind-blowing concept just because of the intersection. But this allows us to do composability in the glass, in the browser in ways that it will take a lot more work to do that on the server side. That type of event-based orchestration, real-time response, if you were to do it in the server-side language across different languages, would be very hard. To do it using Oasis, using JavaScript as a substrate in the event model promises, makes a lot of sense. So that's what we did. So if you were to be interested in this, you can go on Oasis.js and see if this will help you. Maybe the first use case is embed some other utility that has caused you trouble. But the bold statement of the day is that with Oasis.js, the Ember host app can now embed any number of JavaScript app in sandbox and interact with no security concern. So that is a big win for the Ember community to say that don't stop arguing what library is better. You know, if you choose to use Ember as your overall routing and dealing with all the stuff that the host environment needs to do, you can now use any, if you need a sandbox, you can now have this technology in Oasis to make that happen.
Can you use Oasis in other frameworks as well?
Yes, so because it's completely agnostic.
To repeat the question.
Can you use Oasis if your host application is in other frameworks, such as Angular or Backbone or even jQuery or something? Yes, because it is using a very small primitives of just functions and callbacks and all this stuff like that. So if you have an Angular app, you want to embed an Ember app within it, you can do the same thing. And obviously, there's a lot more going on that you can do, but at the basic use case of embedding, that would be one use case. How does it compare to Google Kaha? We thought we're going to use Google Kaha. Like the first version of Oasis is that we're going to take the code. So Google Kaha is basically a preprocessor of JavaScript codes. So if you're submitting your JavaScript code to a Google Plus or something like that, then you want to have an app that is run within Google Plus. How does Google Plus know that your app is not doing something malicious or trying to overwrite the DOM or steal the password? So one way to do it, and it's a logical way to do it, is to statically process your JavaScript and wire up essentially, okay, you're not actually calling the DOM, you're calling some function that calls the DOM, so I can restrict what you can do. So it's kind of a proxy of something. The problem is that it slows down everything. Yehuda and Tom actually explored it. We actually talked to the Kaha team, tried it, and realized that's not the right way if we want high performance, we want nesting. So we decided against using Kaha out of practical limitations. Obviously, with EX6, certain things will get a little bit easier, will get faster. But iframe seems like the right way to do it. The one problem with iframe is that if your thing grow in height, it's hard for the parent to tell, to figure out, not have a scroll bar. So what we've decided to do is just, let's have a height service. Like when you believe your height has changed, just send a message to your parents like, hey, my height is now 700 pixels. And then the parent's like, great, I'm going to update your pixel. So if we add some window management type of semantics on top of this simplistic layer, we can kind of do a lot of things that Kaha can do with all the sandboxing that people have come to understood about iframes, right? Which is pretty solid. So we're basically trying to polyfuse similar iframes where things are exactly the height, it doesn't have the scroll bar issue. We're working on that right now. If you follow the conductor.js project, you will actually see Cyril and David from Tilda checking in code, fixing some of these issues. And by the time these frameworks will be done, I think we can really make a dent at making the web more composable and making the web framework much less about complete single-page sovereign app as the way iOS has kind of get people to realize that's okay. But the web is all about interoperability. This is just the next logical step to that. So this is the work that McGraw-Hill has continued to be funding, and I really want people to use it, tell us how it can improve. It's an open source project, so you can contribute to it and give us use case, stump us, and then eventually we'll make the web much more composable, and that's our vision.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. While Kosta's getting set up, I would like you guys just to take 1 minute, 60 seconds, find somebody who's sitting near you that you don't know, and say hello, introduce yourself.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So I first heard about I first heard about 2B because my good friends Matthew Beal and Corey Forsyth were working on told me that they were working on this interesting project, and when I asked them about it, and I said, well, so what is it exactly? And it's something that is so different from anything that I've seen on the web before, that I thought the best way to be able to share with you guys is to have Kosta, who's one of the founders of 2B, come and show it to us and tell us about it. So welcome to Ember NYC.
Thanks, Luke. So some of you might have seen a quick demo of this in one of the previous Ember meetups. Hopefully this will be a better demo. So 2B, it's an Ember app, and it's a new web medium. It's a set of tools for collaging the internet, and it's a place to be yourself, and I'm going to show you what that means. What I have here is actually one of the spaces that you can create with this application, which we call fields. It's a collaborative space, so you can invite other people, and everything you're doing in it is propagated to the other users. So it's a constantly shifting canvas that you can use to collage any kind of media that you can see on the internet. For example, images, JPEGs, GIFs, video, iframes, music, and so forth. These are images here, and what's interesting about what we're doing is you can paint on anything here, and you can kind of bringing any kind of media, and you can mask it and collage it in a way that is probably not very familiar for your common web experience. So I brought in an iframe here and from Vimeo, and I can also paint on it, and I can mask it. Oops. So I'm not using my computer, so I'm not really. So you can essentially create these kind of experiences. And you can see it's sort of messy. And this is kind of very important to us because, and it's sort of what we mean when we say we want to create a place to be yourself, because everything that we see on the web is great, but things are always boxed, things are always shiny. There's this tendency towards creating things that are coming out of a factory, and we want to totally disrupt that and create something that it feels very handmade. You know, it encourages mistakes. It encourages imperfection, which is a truer reflection of how we are most of the time. I wanted to show you some. So this is basically the field. This is what you can create. You can bring in other people. You can invite other people. You can share this, make it a public link. So it's essentially a space you can distribute. You can share it on any of the networks. We have a library where you can then bring in. Let's bring in some images here. So you can create an elaborate space where you can, I mean, we're very excited about using GIFs in this because it actually, the possibilities are really amazing. And I'm kind of like not thinking creatively here, but the possibility is really amazing. And I guess I should just go ahead and show you the other parts of the system. So, you know, so that's part of the one part of the experience. These things we call fields. The other part of the experience is basically your user profile, where we mean to create these kind of portfolios for people, and where they can, like you'll see what your collaborators are. You're gonna have like a social experience based around these fields. And my fields are not very interesting, but I'm gonna show you some of the stuff that we're collecting here on our Tumblr. This is done this was done yesterday by a person who played with it for the first time, a high school student, and created this. I guess I skipped the whole part about how this is a new web medium. The reason why we think of it as a new medium is because it's a zoomable experience. It's a zoomable free experience that's more like a Google map than a regular website. Trying to zoom in here. So you can kind of like go in and explore these things at a very close proximity to the objects, which is proving to be a very, very interesting experience. And we're looking to build in more features around capturing these sort of what we call crops in these fields, because just imagine how many different compositions there are just within this field that could be then shared. Something that I also didn't mention is you can have music, you can bring in MP3s, and so far MP3s only, but you can bring in music, you can attach it to any image. So every object, I'm gonna go back to every object is basically built out of multiple layers. You have the base image or an iframe, you have a canvas on top, which collects all the paint that you're shooting at it, and you can also add music just by dropping it on it. And then when you go back, you can just click play on it, and then you have music as well. And we have this playlist sort of that collects all the different music files that you've attached to it, so you can play it sequentially. Let's go back and see some other work. One of my favorites. These are all just kind of crops or just static screenshots. This is an embed here of a full field. This is one of our. So that's sort of what we're doing now. Maybe the interesting part. Let's talk about the technology around this. So everything that you saw is HTML5. They're all DOM elements on the page, composed of different layers. We're using Canvas, obviously, heavily. And we're using CSS transforms for this kind of panning and zooming experience. I'll get to it in a bit. Then we have Ember and Ember data client. We have Krajcev for unit testing. We have a basic API that's kind of storing the information about the object, the field, and what information about users. Capybara and RSpec for integration tests. And then Google Cloud Storage with coarse headers for large bitmaps. Now, this is the very interesting part that makes what we're doing sort of scalable, and I mean, it's still to be tested. We're still in beta. But it's very interesting because with Google coarse headers, and if somebody doesn't know what that is, I'll go into it, allows us to totally bypass our Ruby server and directly store large bitmaps to the Google Cloud, and then consume those bitmaps, which is great because we're actually this is a very heavy experience. Like it's meant to be a high definition experience. So in a regular session, there could be up to 20, 30 megabytes on the app, or even on the download. Now, why we chose Ember? It's since the beginning we've kind of been imagining this sort of very complex, fluid single-page application, and so we had certain requirements around the user experience. And then I had not known about Ember, but then we started working with Corey and Matt, and they brought Ember, and it actually turned out to be really the right answer for what we were looking for. You know, it's the experience is very collaborative, it's reactive, and Ember provides a really good framework for just kind of thinking and crafting this application. And of course, it has very good primitives for building kind of modular pieces that we can reuse. Well, when Luke asked us to present this, you kind of wanted us to speak about like the whole experience, like the good and the bad, and I guess the ugly. I want to erase the ugly because actually it's not. It's been very good. The problems with Ember, my problems with Ember has been just kind of understanding it, or just understanding how to work with it, because I've done a lot of JS code, but I never really worked with any framework, a JavaScript framework. So it was a good learning experience. And then in the same time, I mean, you're all very familiar here how Ember has been changing, and it really, after RC1 or after the new router got introduced, is when things started like falling into place for me, at least. The problems with the architecture that we've dealt with is we were trying to do what we're doing with Google now via S3, which actually didn't work because it was very inconsistent. They wouldn't return the course headers. It was kind of very, very inconsistent. And
can you talk a little bit more about that inconsistency?
Well, it was actually, part of it was course. The other, I have a, basically, the reason why we eventually switched to Google because we had a read after write inconsistency. The S3 is kind of divided into these regions. So then you upload on one, but it can't be reached by the other. And it was like this kind of very messy, very unpredictable experiences. Google has proved to be a lot better with it. In addition, there's the CDN is built into it. So we kind of benefit from, we benefit from just dealing with one thing, just dealing with one sort of API. Well, to go back to the good parts is that like Ember has definitely been improving. There's been many moments for me where I just thought that it shouldn't be this easy to implement this. I mean, it's just in terms of the complexity that is being managed with just a piece of code. And then I'm just really very excited to hear a lot of the talks that have been going on here. The Oasis.js looks amazing. I think we might have some use for it. And and I guess the other interesting part is that it kind of allows us to now use other third-party services like Honeybadger in combination with TraceKit, which has been very fundamental to our debugging process lately, because we're getting these elaborate stack traces from our clients every time they hit an error, a JavaScript error, so we can go in and see a lot of like contextual information about how to debug a specific issue. And Ember has been great because we can cook into the router, we can pull in all the, we can pull the whole state, the current state of the application with these Honeybadger reports. And that's pretty much it. I encourage everybody to go try it out. You can hit this link and you can just register for it. And we're looking for feedback as we're developing this. More importantly, we're looking for more people to help us develop this very interesting, amazing, kind of next level product. Thank you. Any questions?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kosta. I really appreciate it. You know, once upon a time, there was a blog post that was linked on Hacker News that had a criticism about Ember that all Ember apps look the same. Believe it or not. So a criticism is all Ember apps look the same, and obviously they never saw this one because this looks like nothing I've ever seen in my life. It's really cool.
Thank you. It's like an Ember app cross LSD.
There you go. All right, so next up, I need some audience participation to figure out what the next talk is. We have, thanks. We have we've got Erik Bryn talking about ListView, which is a library for doing a virtualized ListView in Ember, or Erik Bryn, Erik's cousin, doing a talk about integration testing with Ember. So just by a show of hands, who would like to see the ListView talk first? Okay, cool. And who would like to see the testing talk first? Well, that is close, but I think the testing talks takes it, so I'm happy to introduce, for the first time ever at the NYC meetup, Mr. Erik Bryn. Coming in from San Francisco.
Actually, no,
coming from Seattle, right?
I was in Seattle.
Erik gave a talk in Seattle last night.
I gave these exact same 2 talks in Seattle, so.
If any of you were there, I apologize.
I was probably the only one.
So welcome, Erik. Thank you.
Thank you. So I should probably hook this up. So yeah, I was on a whim. I was going to give a ListView talk. I was planning on giving the ListView talk in Seattle yesterday, and I was getting nagged by Gordon Hempton, who runs the Seattle meetup with Chris Selden, to give a talk on Ember testing because It's exciting, and I can understand that because I'm really excited about it too. And so I whipped this together yesterday, so hopefully it doesn't seem too much like it did. We'll see. So I'm curious, who's written integration tests here before, using something like Selenium or Capybara or, I don't know. So a lot of people, great. How much do you like that? They're fast, right? Okay, tough crowd. So yeah, really that's kind of, I'm trolling the status quo of integration testing because that, in my experience, is pretty much the reaction that everybody has to integration testing. Integration testing is extremely valuable, and I think a lot of the thinking that has gone into testing Ember applications by folks like Joe Liss and Katie recommend focusing, since Ember does so much of the work for you, it's best you get the most bang for your buck by writing integration tests rather than writing unit tests. I agree with that, but certainly there are cases where unit tests are appropriate, like if you have extremely complicated logic and computed properties and stuff like that. Writing unit tests for the controller or model that those tests, that those computed properties might live in is extremely valuable. So I'm really excited because since integration testing is so slow usually for web applications, you tend to not want to do it a lot, and or you're a glutton for punishment and you force yourself to do it, and you just spend a ton of time waiting for those tests to run. And so I'm happy to announce, I will change the slide at some point. I'm happy to announce that I think I have a solution, and it is extremely fast, and it is awesome, and I'm going to share with you tonight. So the TLDR of integration testing web applications is that there's asynchrony in your application. You click a link, or you click a button and an AJAX request has to go fire off to retrieve data, and then you need to basically wait to make assertions until that data has returned and the Ember application has rendered that data to the screen. And there isn't a great mechanism out there, perhaps until now, for dealing with that. The typical approach is polling. So Capybara, which I'm experienced with, basically just sits and polls. You try to find an element in the page to make assertions against. Like, I want to assert that that element exists. And it basically just like, I think it might be 5 seconds by default. And basically it just sits there and polls waiting for it to appear, and if it doesn't appear in 5 seconds, it throws an error. So you can imagine that those 5-second timeouts can add up. And there's a lot of wasted time and CPU cycles. So when you're writing integration tests, you want to programmatically navigate your application, but you're constantly having to wait for this asynchronous behavior to complete before you can actually do the assertions. And so when thinking about this problem, it's helpful to understand that there's actually a finite amount of sources of async in the browser. And basically it's set timeout, set interval, XHRs, there's some more fancy ones like DOM mutation observers, IndexedDB, postmessage, etc. There's a couple more that aren't on this list. This is basically where async gets into your application. And so the idea is, if you can perhaps track these things, you can know when the asynchronous behavior has finished. And we'll talk more about that later. But in an Ember application, 90%, in my experience, of the async comes from set timeouts, XHR, and the run loop. And the run loop in the sense that when you do things in Ember, we have the run loop. It does deferring of events so that we can coalesce them. So if you set a property multiple times, that would cause the DOM to update. We wait until we run your application code, you do multiple sets. We then only update DOM with the last set, right? So there is some asynchrony there, but that asynchrony is guaranteed to be synchronous at the end of the event. When the run loop flushes, all of your asynchrony is gone related to run loop deferrals. But you still have to deal with set timeout and XHR. So what is the solution to this async problem? I've alluded to it a little bit, but philosophically, I think people need to think like, if people need to not fight the async, we need to embrace it, as this is the line that Steph stole from me earlier. That is debatable. So don't fight the async, embrace it, and make it easy, and then profit.
Actually, I think Luke probably.
Yes. We'll have to look at the prior art on that one. So, one might say the nut has been cracked. However, there's still more work to be done, preface, but I've already started using it, or we're going to use it tonight. I'm going to walk you through writing an integration test. It is awesome, or amazing maybe. So I really want to add a nice DSL that will make RSpec and Capybara fans feel at home. And right now it's a little more bare bones, but this is the API we're going to go over is kind of like the primitives, and we can build upon those primitives. So we're going to do a live demo, but just real quick, I want to point out that this is the current list of helpers. There's a visit helper, click helper, fill in, and find, and we're going to use those right now. So let me not make the mistake I made last night, and let me close my IM and my campfire so that nothing pops up on screen while I am. Okay, so probably should have did this before I got up here. Maybe. Great. All right. So this is the test. Let's delete it though. We're going to walk through this. Oh, you know what? I'm going to show you what it looks like. Wrong one. Hold on 1 second. Let me get this app running. I thought I had it already up. Hopefully I don't have to bundle. All right, so we're going to write some integration tests for the Blogger app that Tom did for the Ember screencast that is up on ember.js.com/guides. And this project lives up on GitHub. If you want to follow along or skip ahead or whatever, it is at github/ebryn/blogger. Why isn't this auto-completing? Maybe? Yes, cool. And you can go in the tests JavaScript directory and check it out. So I deleted our tests a little prematurely. This is what it looks like. You can see your application as the tests are running. You can throw breakpoints inside of your tests and actually inspect it in the browser. And so you can actually I'm extremely excited because now I actually feel like it is efficient to TDD an Ember application now. You can basically, I find myself throwing breakpoints in the test to find the selectors that I'm going to be doing assertions with, or the selectors of the items that I'm going to be clicking. And so anyways, let's write some tests. You've kind of seen the code already. This is kind of the boilerplate right now that exists, and I would like to reduce. But the idea is we're using QUnit. So this will run in the browser, or if you have a QUnit CLI runner, you can do that too, which is cool for your continuous integration environment. Everybody can see that, right? Okay, cool. I'll bump up the font a little bit. So basically what's happening, let me go to the test helper. So this is kind of the boilerplate also. I'm doing crazy shit to render the little app in the corner. But basically, you set the root element of your app. You say render the application in this container. And then these are the two functions that you call. You basically call app setup for testing, which will tell the application to defer rendering itself, so that when the application code is instantiated, it won't on DOM ready just render itself like it would normally. And then there's also inject test helpers. And this is what it actually injects into the global, onto the window, the test helper functions that we're going to use inside of our tests. This is subject to change. I would like to make it easy. This is pretty easy right now, though. So this code gets executed for us because we're requiring the test helper is getting required. And then basically in our QUnit setup method, we just run app.advancedReadiness, which causes the application to get rendered into the page. And then on teardown, we reset the application, like Steph said earlier. This basically tears down all of the state inside of the application namespace and gives you a fresh application. So you saw how fast those tests were. That was actually tearing down the application between each test, too. So we're talking like for like simple tests with like maybe one AJAX request, it's like sub 200 milliseconds. Also, the cool thing about this approach is that it can actually be used, it can do full stack testing, so it can actually test against your APIs. And this is something I would like to improve, but you could also, if you're using Ember Data or my library Ember Model, they have fixture adapters. And so you could actually make those tests even faster by swapping in the fixture adapter. So you're not actually waiting on your server. You know, you're not slowed down by the AJAX request to your server. So I've been talking a lot. Let's do some coding. So we're just going to write, our first test will just be a dumb, simple test that basically the application, when you go to the root, will render the nav bar. Because right now, if we go to the application's root, it just shows this. So let's just write a test asserting that the nav bar gets rendered. So hopefully everyone's familiar with QUnit. I think this is, again, a prime example for where, like, a nice DSL, like perhaps if you name the test with the URL, it will automatically call visit. And so the thing that is interesting about the Ember testing framework is that we utilize promises heavily. And if you aren't familiar with promises, get familiar with them because they are amazing. And we have Dominic here who can do some sailing on promises later, or Steph. What's that?
There's promises.
Oh, there's promise stickers. Do you have promise rings?
Are you looking for one?
Well, maybe. We'll see how the night goes. So we're going to, basically what we're doing is we're saying, let's go to the root URL, and our then function will get called when all of the async has finished. And right now what that means is all of the run loops done. There aren't any scheduled run loops to occur like if you're using Ember run next or Ember run later. And basically, so right now you can't use set timeout. You have to use an Ember run loop aware set timeout, which is Ember run later. And then if you're using jQuery for your AJAX, we are hooking into jQuery's AJAX start and AJAX stop to basically have a time counter. So as you start AJAX requests, we increment the counter, and as they finish, we decrement it, and we basically wait for that counter to reach 0. So if you had hanging AJAX requests, that will be a problem. But hopefully you don't. Or perhaps the fixture. So an interval polling is another thing, but I'm not going to go into that now. But I think there are solutions. So yeah, we're going to visit, and then in the code here, we know things should be on the page. So let's just do a simple assertion. I wrote a little exists helper. You pass it a selector. I know it is .navbar. And we'll describe the navbar was rendered. Great. Am I missing closing parentheses? Huh? Thank you. Thank you, JS Hint. It's always good to have a human JS Hint around. So, boom, our test passed. And if you look, it ran in 300 milliseconds. I think we could probably get that down too. Actually, I have an idea. This is a terrible idea. What am I doing? So let's turn this down. Oh, look at that. It's 100 milliseconds down. Oh, I just improved performance by 3x. Wow. Okay. That's a good idea. Great.
That's version 2 of
Yeah. RC4 coming soon with performance improvements. All right. So yeah. Can I get a round of applause for that? Isn't that pretty amazing? So thanks, Ian. So when I got this working, so it was an iterative approach to the API. I went down the simple approach of callback hell, you know, and then I looked back and I said, wow, I really want to troll the Node.js community by using promises. So I need to figure out a way to wedge them in here, whether they're the right tool for the job or not. But they are actually, and our next test will show why promises are awesome. Because this is easy, right? We're only waiting for a single asynchronous thing to happen. But let's say we want to visit a URL, then we want to click a button. And so we're going to have, how are we going to avoid the callback hell of waiting on multiple, that's where the multiple asynchronous things is where the nesting comes from. So let's go to, I think it's /posts. So we're going to go to /posts. I feel like I should be, why doesn't QUnit have a better DSL? We're going to create one. So we'll visit. Actually, this also looks amazing in CoffeeScript. I would suggest writing your test in CoffeeScript because it's really cool. Posts, visit posts, then, God, I can't type.
Is that Erik Bryn script?
No. And so now, this is why CoffeeScript is good, because the implicit return. Because we're going to want to return, we're going to click on this thing here, which I believe from yesterday when I live coded this is span. The selector, you obviously may want to add, this may be controversial, but sometimes it's nice to add handy selectors to the elements that you're going to be clicking so that it's obvious in your test what is happening. But right here, we're just going to do click span3a. And so basically click returns a promise just like visit does. And so if you're familiar with promises, when you return a promise from a promise, your head explodes. And basically you can chain a then on the previous then, and it will get resolved when the promise you have returned gets resolved. So let's assert that when you click oh my god, that we see the title oh my god. And I believe this is an H1. Great. So we are going to assert OK, whoops, why am I doing this? OK exists, and I'm going to do something crazy, kind of contains, oh my god. So this is actually, this helper is passing directly through to jQuery. And it's actually, exists is built, was just a little quick hack because I kept writing this yesterday and it was really obnoxious. But basically find is just scoping a jQuery selector to the Ember application because you have QUnit also on the page, so you want to make sure you're not selecting things that are part of the QUnit test runner. What's that? Yes. Yeah, so we're you can just pass whatever jQuery valid jQuery selector syntax you want here. And so we're going to say, great, the title was rendered. And JSN, where are you? So now let's try this again. Boom. It passes. Awesome. The tests are so fast you can't even see the application navigate. But so here's where this kind of stuff, where this really, being able to write your integration tests and use them in the browser is amazing because you can throw a debugger in here. And so if something is failing, you can just inspect the state of the application right here. I can't tell you how many times I've had mysterious failures inside of my Capybara integration tests. And I think there has been some work, like maybe with some poltergeist or run some kind of WebKit, you can attach the WebKit inspector to it, but it just doesn't come that way. It's not easy. it's not also the same environment that you're actually developing the application in. I mean, you could literally, I would like, my ideal situation is that you can actually develop your Ember application from the test runner. Like, you can interact with the application completely here. And so it's really going to make, hopefully, TDD of Ember applications extremely easy and almost like painful to not do because it's just so easy. So yeah, I think, let me see what I have slide-wise. So here are the to-dos, more test helpers, a DSL perhaps, more async support, and you tell me. This is like a week old, so I would love feedback. There's a lot of excitement. I would love feedback. I will not support Jasmine, if that was the question.
No, that wasn't the question.
No. What's up?
Do you mind going back to the code?
Yeah, sure.
Can you go into a bit more detail, see line 12, how it knows that navbar is actually rendered?
I'm sorry? How it knows it's rendered. So basically, the promise here, when this code is executed, I am dealing with all the async for you. You are guaranteed that everything async has occurred when this function gets executed. So
including the rendering.
That's part of the Ember run loop. So that is included, yeah. Well, so the only async that I'm supporting right now is basically Ember run later, Ember run next, and jQuery, $.ajax and all of the related jQuery Ajax things. It is trivial to add support for others, assuming they have the kind of hooks that jQuery does. I actually have my own Ajax library, so I built on top of RSVP because I don't like jQuery deferreds. But yeah, so, all right, other question.
Yeah, what are the dependencies and also,
so
I haven't figured out a name yet.
It's called Ember-testing right now. So the question was, have you picked out a name and what are the dependencies? So the name is just Ember-testing right now. I did not want to come up with something racier. But I don't know if you have ideas, let me know. I don't have a problem just calling it Ember-testing. I mean, it's really just, my hope is that it is Ember's testing library for the Ember users. But certainly it could be, if you are more ambitious, or perhaps if I was more ambitious, it could actually be a generic solution for other JavaScript frameworks too. There's no reason why it couldn't be. Although I don't know if other frameworks have the architecture to like the rendering pipeline and stuff like that to make it. It literally is like 20 lines of code. So I'm like ashamed that I haven't written it already. It just, I think that the stars aligned and we basically were like, hey, so I should also point out that the reason the whole reason I wrote Ember testing was for my clients, because my clients were like, both I needed a solid testing solution and I wasn't ready. I did not want to go, from my experience at Square, I did not want to go down the capybara road because I knew that would just end badly and make me want to slit my wrists. So I talked to some of the other core team members, like Steph was great assistance, and we had kind of the idea that promises were part of the answer, and that you could actually, with the run loop, and since there are only so many ways that async can get into your app, we figured there was an easy way that we could keep track, do some bookkeeping on async, and so yeah, it was my client work. I'm helping Joe out, and so everybody can thank Joe for some of this work, and also Live Nation Labs has been paying me to work on this. So thanks to them, now everyone can benefit. That's the great thing about open source, right? And so back to your question, The dependencies are QUnit, basically. And right now, it is assuming it's being used with Ember. So jQuery and Ember, obviously. But those are already dependencies.
So you don't need Rails to run the test?
No, absolutely not. So basically, my plan is actually, and maybe if somebody wants to help me out, there's no reason that we couldn't bundle in the starter kit, QUnit, and a sample integration test. You don't need a backend to run these. It runs all in the browser. It's just JavaScript. So yeah, the starter kit could come with a test directory and QUnit and Ember, and it'll just work. So yeah, what's up?
Where's your QUnit start and stop?
That's part of the magic. It's there. It's there. Oh, sorry. The question was, where is your QUnit start and stop? Well, the answer is, it's part of the waiting. So basically, when I'm waiting for async, when you call visit, I call stop, and when I'm waiting and I know that the async is completed, I call start. So I've completely abstracted that away from you, so you don't have to write that code yourself. Yep, I basically just keep calling stop and start for you. Yeah. But when I first wrote this, I had that in here, and then I was like, I think it might have been staff or somebody was like, why do you, let's get rid of that. And I was like, oh yeah, actually that's really easy. So.
Why QUnit as a foundation and not Mocha Chire?
So QUnit so we use QUnit for Ember. I think there's constantly, people love, it's like an engineering fetish to write test frameworks. And QUnit is just solid, and it deals with async extremely well, better than any other test framework that I've ever worked with. Jasmine is terrible at async in my experience. And nobody works on Jasmine. And even pivots can't get their pull requests merged into Jasmine. So I basically have abandoned Jasmine, although I used it at Square for a year, and I do like that. I do like that style. So I definitely would like to have part of my idea of the DSL may include like a more Jasmine-y BDD style testing style, if you choose to use it, or you can use. I got into a big debate about this yesterday with Gordon. I don't care about the code quality of my tests. My tests, I don't care about reducing code duplication or anything in tests. I want my tests to be fast, and I want them to be reliable. And in my experience with working with Jasmine, and perhaps this is controversial, maybe I'm wrong, you can prove me wrong at the bar. When you deal with the nesting contexts and befores and before eaches and all that, and we at Square had let implemented in JavaScript, which was awesome. When you have a lot of tests, it's very hard when you're debugging a failure to actually get all that context in your head, because you're navigating the hierarchy, and there's just a lot of cleverness that typically is involved. And for me, I have no problem copying and pasting tests and having code duplication all over the place, because I don't care. I care about my application's code quality, and that's why I'm writing the tests to begin with, right? So that's my philosophy, but that may be controversial, I don't know. So I think there are some actual, specifically Mocha, I believe there are architectural issues with Mocha that make it not something we can use, but I'm not an expert on that. I just like QUnit, but I think that it could definitely be made nicer with a QUnit has the primitives, and you could build on top of it very easily. So I would like to do that if I get the time. Any other questions?
Awesome.
All right, great.
Cool. Thanks so much, Erik.
Yep.
This looks awesome. I'm going to give you, as you sit down, I'm going to give you my feature requests.
Okay.
One is to work well with Pavlov, which is a nice DSL run on top of QUnit. And the second one is to reverse, to your point about kind of being able to develop your app using the test framework. It'd be awesome to kind of run an in-reverse test runner where the tests were kind of down in the corner,
yeah,
and your whole app was the main thing.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
The runner is so easy. Like, the runner is so simple, you can just customize it however you want, you know? It's really, that's literally like 5 lines of HTML and 2 lines of CSS. So, awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so next up, I need 3 volunteers. One person who is willing to volunteer has no idea whatsoever what he's volunteering for. I love it. Anybody else? Okay, I'll tell you what you're volunteering for. Oh, Dominic. All right, number 2. And Hagen's number 3. Fantastic. We've got 3 volunteers. Great. So I'd like to bring Michael Madrid up. There's Michael. Now, has anybody ever been to a meetup here where we've done a game show segment? Anybody know about? Yeah. Okay. Cool. We're gonna do that. We were thinking about what are the games that we haven't played yet. We've done Jeopardy. We've done the $64,000 pyramid. Press your luck. We've done a good one. We've done the Wheel of Fortune. We've done the did we do the Prices Right? We haven't done the Prices Right yet. But the other one that we haven't, another thing we haven't done is Draw Something. Or Pictionary. And so I'm happy to have Michael Madrid to lead us in this. And why don't we get Alexander Machnier up as our first contestant. Are you?
Hello, hello. Oh, it's loud. Okay. Okay, good evening, everybody. So as Luke said, tonight we are going to do Draw Something Ember, which is not to be confused with the other Draw Something released by a company which just had really bad earnings last night, causing a major, not a minor hickey to certain portfolios, but we will talk no more about that. So, what happened here? Okay, so have people played Pictionary? This is basically going to be like Pictionary. And I will do a simple example, but for this example, this demonstration, you will have to pretend that you are at the Angular.js meetup, okay? And I'm going to draw a picture. Oh. Why did you say it? Sorry, I shouldn't have that line there, but anyway. Okay, what is it? Anyone? Yes, transclusion, exactly. Who let her in tonight? Okay. Good. Who is our first volunteer? Alex, yes. Okay, the answer is not Emblem.js. Just a little hint. Okay. I think you can do that. Do we have, rules? Obviously you can't draw, you can't like write what you're supposed to guess. No letters or symbols to, and nothing offensive, please.
What are we setting the timer for?
I don't know, 1 minute? 30 seconds?
Let's go 1 minute.
1 minute, okay.
And you all are contestants, okay?
Yes,
everybody
and
gets to guess.
and the most important part of the game is whoever guesses gets
a Thompson sticker.
As does the person drawing the picture. So there's motivation too. Okay. Ready? Go. Wow, 10.8 seconds.
Not too shabby. Did they get harder or easier, Michael?
Of course, easier. This will be a little harder, hopefully.
Okay, let's have Hagen up next. Oops.
Oh, by the way, thank you to Edgar back there for lending us this iPad. Okay, hold on.
Oh, yeah. I would just use
Okay. You can choose any of your favorite colors. Okay. So please choose your color.
The ante has been upped. You get a 2B sticker as well.
Okay, you have 7.2 seconds to think about what you're going to draw. Okay, I'll give you an extra 4 seconds. Ready? Remember, there's an Ember, there's a Tomster sticker on the line, so. Okay, ready? Okay, ready? Gotta do this. We have Erik Bryn's cousin coming up, so. Ready? Go!
Yeah, so that's another thing. We need a back.
Actions binding.
You have each 37 more seconds.
Can you be more specific?
Oh, one to many.
Relationships?
18 more seconds.
Sushi? No.
8 seconds. Oh, I'm sorry, there will be no stickers that round. This would have been difficult.
Let's reveal the answer.
The answer is, of course, you're all gonna have a collective sigh when I say it, but of course, state manager. Oh, did they? Oh. I don't think he said state machine. Yeah. Luke, you should have done that after because now what's the motivation going to be for the person writing? Anyway, okay. Okay, our final contestant. Don't worry. Yeah. Pick your color. Don't worry, this one isn't so bad. Okay, good. Ready? Ready? Got your color and everything? Go! 52 seconds.
Transition.
Unbind. Bunching. Class.
26 seconds. No talking, please.
Class diagram.
What was that? Reopen class. In the back?
Reopen class.
Yes. Does everyone know what reopen class does? No?
You, sir, are a psychic.
I don't know what he's done.
Okay, reopen class, basically, if you want to define methods on your class methods on your class, which aren't there already, you can reopen the class and put them in.
Wait, hold on. What about,
Yeah.
why would you do that instead of extending?
So those are instance methods. Extend is defining instance properties in instance methods.
reopen class and find class methods and class methods.
All right, so these games are educational. Thank you, Michael. That was great. Okay, moving right along, we have Andy Leeper coming in from San Francisco to talk to us about don't fear the Leeper. So while Andy's getting set up, I just want to tell you a story. Thank you. Tell you a quick story. We went out to San Francisco for Ember Camp, which was the first ever Ember kind of conference. And I was really hungry afterwards, and there was a group of people, so we're going to dinner. And instead of going to dinner, we ended up following Andy to a karaoke joint for an epic evening of karaoke. Yes, there was frisking out the door for weapons, so I'm not sure what that was about.
Yeah, what was that place? I don't think Pandora.
Very, very happy to welcome to New York City, Andy Leeper.
Yes.
About arrays.
Let me pull up my presentation real quick. Maybe you can warm the crowd.
I'll vamp for a little while longer.
That's not my presentation. That's where I'd like to be.
So other things that I know about Andy.
Jeez, no.
Andy works at Mocha Leaf. Andy's been working on an IndexedDB adapter.
Oh yes, I have.
For Ember Data. So for those of you who don't know what that means, Ember Data has the concept of adapters, which is basically how to talk to a given storage mechanism. So that might be a REST API that you're reading and writing to. It might be local storage. Or if you're lucky to work in modern awesome browsers, maybe it's IndexedDB. And if it is, then you might want to talk to Andy.
Yes.
But that's not what this talk is about.
That's not what this one is. So actually what I'm here to talk about is Ember arrays. And so it's kind of broken up into two little parts. If you're kind of a newbie to Ember, I'm going to cover some concepts that are applicable to you. So if you're kind of advanced, don't fall asleep, because at the end I'm going to talk about a plugin a mixin that I wrote that might be interesting. So let me talk about myself a little bit. This is like the animated version of me. I work at a company called Mocha Leaf. I'm a software engineer, I'm a code reviewer. I teach my employees stuff. I'm the business guy. I've been doing software development actually since I was like a little kid, but anyway, that's who I am. And this is my little sales pitch slide. That's why I can justify coming out here. But we're basically hiring people for doing Ember JavaScript development. I won't spend too much time on that. And of course, there's a picture of a cat. So that's our talent. So let me talk a little bit about arrays and the array problem. Don't worry, Erik, I'm not actually going to razz on Ember this time. Basically, when we want to do stuff with arrays, we typically want to manipulate, we want to filter, we want to sort them, we want to sometimes get introspection on them as we mutate them to be able to do more stuff. And for the most part, we want to do these in any kind of order, and we want to customize kind of what we want to do. So, for example, you might want to, if you're working with really large data sets, you might want to filter that data set and then sort it, so you don't have to do a really expensive sort operation on a very large data set. Or vice versa, maybe you want to sort stuff because it makes sense, and then you want to filter off the top 10, or who knows. But the point is that that's something that we want to do. And actually, there's some Ember APIs built in that do kind of help you with that. And I'm going to talk about those just kind of briefly. So there's at the kind of top level, there's the array controller and the array proxy. Really the point of that is just kind of wrap around the original content. There's something built in called item controller. I actually didn't know this until earlier today, but you can actually use it inside of templates. It's pretty cool. And it basically lets you give a specific controller to kind of handle manipulation of objects, so that you don't have to clutter your your array controller with stuff. There's sortable mixin, which is already kind of mixed in for you inside of the array controller. But if you're new to Ember, you might not understand that that's there. But it's something you should understand that's there because it's a really quick and easy way to sort stuff inside of your array. And then there's all sorts of little observer callbacks that get fired whenever your array is mutated. So there's array content will change, array content did change, and there's ways to add array observers. So I'm going to talk really briefly about each one of these. But basically, like the point of array controller or array proxy is to wrap around your backing content array so that you can do additional stuff without kind of affecting the content array that backs it. So a good example of that, like for an array proxy, is to go through and let's say I wanted to add a is selected, or let's say I wanted to add a is sorted property to my array or to my array object as a whole. So by having an array proxy kind of wrap around that, you can you kind of get to extend the behavior that by adding those properties onto it. It also kind of allows you to have observation hooks. So by wrapping your just kind of traditional array, it allows you to write methods to kind of fire observers and to perform mutations and whatnot. There's the item controller. And the item controller is basically a way to delegate responsibility out to another controller so that you can perform an individual operation. If you're not following exactly what I'm saying, don't worry, because there's actually a demo. And I think it'll make a little bit more sense. But from a really high level, that's the point of it. Sortable mixin, well, that's very easy. You define sort properties, and then your stuff is sorted. So it's really clear, straightforward API. It makes sorting very, very easy. And then the array content will change stuff. It's actually really useful if you wanted to get a feel for what has changed, because what you could do is you can maybe write some code inside of array content will change, which gives you a snapshot or a picture of your array before it changes. And then you can write some code in array content did change, and then you can do a comparison to go, oh, these objects were removed. Or you can do some kind of diffs if you wanted to. Or it's basically just a nice hook to get a certain level of introspection as your array is being mutated. So all that stuff is actually implemented via this method called addArrayObserver. And addArrayObserver actually has like a before change and an after change function that you can give it. And that's very useful if, like, you can add that onto any array that's inside of Ember. So for me, I'm doing a lot of stuff with, I build a lot of like business apps that is very data driven, very data heavy. And so I have to do a lot of customization. And so for me, I end up putting in array observers so that whenever I mutate stuff, I can make sure that I'm updating associations and stuff like that as part of my like Ember data hacks, or hackarounds basically. So with that, I kind of want to show a demo that I have. And this will just take me a second. It's a simple little books app. These are a list of books, and you can go through and you can have it not work on you. I'll blame that one on Ember data. But long story short, this is an Ember data app. But long story short, it's basically just a list of books, right? And one thing I wanted to show is the sort properties and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll come back over here to here and just show you on. I have a kind of books controller here, and just by putting in. My equal signs are magenta, or actually neon pink. It's because this is an HDMI. So, but there is an equal sign there. Whoa. Ew. I can change my color scheme if it's that. Is it that bad? It is that bad.
It looks like there are just multiple spaces.
I can actually see just fine.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it for right now because I don't want to like.
Make it bigger.
Bigger. Does that work?
Big chance of flaw.
Yeah, I have white space like truncation. Like there's a package for Sublime that shows white space. So anyways, you can add in sort properties. And so, for example, if I wanted to sort by the, if I wanted to sort all the books by their particular name, you can do something like this, where it's like sort properties name, and then when you come back over here, obviously it all shows up and it's sorted by name. Or if you wanted to do a sort by year and then by name, you can do sort properties year name, and you can do this. So and then it sorts everything by year first, and then it sorts everything by name second. So it's kind of nice API for sorting stuff. There's let me go back over here. So that's all that stuff's really great for like really basic operations. Like I said, I kind of work on bigger data problems, and so I needed something that's a little bit, not Hadoop big data problems, but not, yeah, you can put that one down. But I do a lot of stuff with array manipulation, so I needed some kind of tool to kind of help me out with that, and so I built something called ArrayPipeline. And if you kind of think about it, it's actually just a series of operations or a series of tubes that you put together. So you go through and you craft one little tube or a plugin, and you chain it together so that you put your stuff from the array into the tube, and then something else comes out the end of it. So kind of like my goals for writing this mixin was to make it pretty easy to understand the order of operations, so that you can perform function 1, 2, 3, and 4 and understand exactly what order they're running in. To provide a familiar interface, so Unix pipes, like, it's not really that offensive to anybody, I don't think, unless you are a Windows junkie. Yeah, I don't think I see anything like that. So, the other thing is to also only recalculate what's needed. So again, when you start working with larger data sets, if you have to go through and refilter and then resort an array just because one property changes, that ends up being kind of hairy. And so we actually shave off seconds from operations in our app by only changing the stuff that actually needs to be changed, and caching the rest, basically. In the ability to be able to change a certain number of operations. So with the sortable mixin is really nice for really basic sorting and stuff like that. It's great because if we have a select list, we'll just throw sortable mixin into an array proxy, and it's great. But for a large table view where we're doing lots of operations on it, like searching and filtering and sorting and all this other kind of stuff, it's nice to be able to chain a whole bunch of operations together. I wanted something a little bit more modular, and I wanted to kind of eliminate the need to built-in override, I wanted to eliminate the need to override the built-in methods, because to me, I kind of sometimes like to rely on the built-in Ember API, and sure, you can call super and have conditionals and kind of do all this other kind of stuff, but I wanted to have my tool just kind of sit on the side, and so that's how it's constructed. So the components of ArrayPipeline are, there's the ArrayPipeline mixin, which you basically just include into an array proxy or into an array controller, and you just use it as is, so there's no subclassing or anything like that. You specify the content that is the backing store for the pipeline, and you specify the plugins for the pipeline. And on the tail end of it, the end of the tube, you use the results array that it spits out. So that's one component. The other component is the pipe plugin, and that's like your small little Unix program that you're piping together. And so that integrates into ArrayPipeline. And what you do is you basically go through and you specify a set of properties that you're interested in observing. So these can be properties on objects that exist inside the array, or these could be properties that exist inside the array controller that is containing all the content of the array. And then the other thing is you specify a process function, and it gets an input, which is the array content from the previous operation, and it gives an output, which is the array for the next operation. So it's a very simple API. And so I'm going to show you an example of that really quick. And what we're going to do is we're going to implement a little search filter up here, live coding permitting. So we'll see. But first I'm going to come over to my little template. So, oh, I wanted to show item controller. It's okay. That's why it wasn't working, because I needed to implement my item controller. Wow, this color seems awesome.
He's using tables, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I literally just don't see.
By the way, this wasn't working because I didn't implement my item controller. So that's basically, I have a separate control over here. It's magic. I know, it's amazing. That's the magic of Ember. No, actually, this is all the table code is, and that's all there is to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement a search widget, and so I have like a little pre-packaged snippet here. Actually, not that one. And so this is just like a simple Ember text field with value binding to some property called search string. It has a placeholder. It's a search type, and I added a class name, so nothing too offensive there. And so if I refresh it, it's up here. Obviously, it doesn't do anything yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my books controller, and my books controller is the array controller that wraps around this content. And so I'm just going to, one thing I like to do is I like to go ahead and just put in a search string and all, because what I typically do is I go, this is going to, yeah, I add in comments typically. And then one of the other things that I want to do is go ahead and put in a pipe plugin. So I'm going to put that in real quick. And so let me kind of explain what's going on here. So we have a search plugin. And what this is going to do is it's going to observe the controller's search string, which is this thing right here.
Can you change the color, please?
Dude, have you changed colors in Sublime Text? You had to like write Python.
No, color scheme right there. Boom.
Oh.
That's not bad.
This is better? Okay.
Thank you.
The white is blinding. It's kind of like.
But project black.
Oh, okay, fine.
Like a dark color that's being projected?
Dawn?
Whoa! Solarized light.
Solarized light. I can't.
Solarized dark.
I love that the only problem I'm having with live coding is my color scheme.
Yeah, solarized dark.
Solarized.
That is a good problem.
Dark or light? Dark?
Yeah, it has a background.
There we go.
Oh. Hey. All right. I'll drink to that. So here's what we have. Basically, we have one little thing here that specifies what I want to observe. And so when this property changes, it's going to trigger a recalculation on this plugin and any subsequent plugins that exist downstream in the pipeline. So there's a whiteboard here. But imagine there's like a filter here, and then there's this like search thing here, and then there's like a sort thing here. The search, if it's the first one that is looking at search string, it'll recalculate and then it'll sort, but it would never like redo the filter, basically. So it's kind of like starting at the plugin and then working downstream. And this process is kind of like the little micro program that makes up the pipe. And you can see it's just getting the search string out of the controller. If we have one, if we don't have one, it's just going to return the full array because clearly you're not searching. Otherwise, you're going to do a regular expression and just return the input array that's been filtered. In this case, we're going to like do it against the name. So that's what that looks like. And then if you come down here, you just have to specify plugins. And this particular plugin is going to be a search plugin. And this is something that's part of ArrayPipeline, is the plugins thing. And then the last thing that I need to do is I need to include my mixin. And the way that you can include mixins in here is to do ArrayPipeline mixin. And then that kind of includes the mixin. So if I come back over here and I refresh, and I come up here, what is blowing up now? Oh, is my regular expression bad? Well, you can tell that it's actually running the array.
Click the stop sign.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to get into debugging in the middle of the.
I think it was just the character. You type a slash, and you're not escaping.
Oh yeah, I'm not. I just did like my lazy. I'm on the plane about to land late. Yeah.
No. Purple stop sign good. Purple stop sign is the best. Yeah.
Why does? Hold on. I don't want to debug this right now. It totally does work. I was testing it right before I got here.
You should write integration passes.
You are 100% correct, sir. This is why Erik Bryn does what he does. Well, long story short, that would technically work. And what's nice about it is that you can come in here and as you write these kind of operations that are segmented out, you can go through and chain them together. So that's kind of what ArrayPipeline does. I'm sorry that the live coding demo doesn't work, but that's live coding. So basically, one thing about this is that I'm kind of like working on this little thing has a little, like I'm working on this little mix-in to solve my particular use case, and I would actually like it to be more generalized and used to provide some kind of advanced interface to be able to do these sort of chainable operations to arrays. So what I would like is if people could kind of jump in and help contribute to solving this particular problem inside of Ember. I know that Peter Wagonet, who's on the core team, is sort of starting to go after this, but you know, he's in the same predicament that I am, which is we're busy doing client work, so we can't work on like something as specific as fixing the array chainable operation problem, basically. So basically, there's a GitHub repository up. I'll show that really quick, but it's pretty well documented. There's examples of how it's supposed to work. There's, you know, a specification of how it's supposed to work. There's unit tests that are actually written against it that work. And so that would be ignore the failing build status. It's because I'm working on stuff right now and Adobe's contributing, so it's okay. But I would like for those things to kind of be fixed. But yeah, please help contribute. I think this is, for me, working with large data sets, it's a very big problem to kind of have to deal with, and so getting more eyes on it, I think would only be good for Ember. And did I mention that we're hiring? Anyway, with that, thanks so much.
Yes. You were using the sort properties as well as the mixin.
Oh, is that why it blew up?
I don't know.
Oh, no, I know why it blew up. I know why it blew up. I know exactly why it blew up. No, I can't. I'm taking it back right now. It has to do because I'm using, my API is meant to not be intrusive and to stand on the side. I didn't change my controller property to results, which is what ArrayPipeline uses. And so if I come back over here and I refresh, I do bim. Yeah, so.
That's fair progress.
Yes. So, thank you. Thanks for. You're in my JS lint, so you solved it. So to answer your question, I think your question is, can you use the sortable mixin with this in addition? And the answer is no. You end up making your own sort pipe plugin that stands on the side of it. So it is like a truly separate plugin. So, yes?
Do you have any pre-made plugins that you can use like sort?
I do have pre-made sort and filtering plugins. They're not in the repo. I will do that tonight or tomorrow. Oh, probably not tonight because we're going to a bar after. But yes.
Karaoke.
Oh no. No, that's horrible. Any other
questions?
No.
All right, cool. Thanks so much, Andy.
Yes, no problem.
Dude,
it's big data in the browser, and you get up to 1 gig memory footprint.
Awesome. So we have one more talk to close out the evening. You guys heard from Erik Bryn earlier tonight, and we're very lucky to have his cousin here with us, Erik Bryn, who's on the Ember core team. And
Is it just me? Hello?
no, there's a button on top.
I pressed, whoa.
We're good. We're good.
Is it just me or is that joke getting old, Luke?
I don't know. Raise your hand if you think that joke is getting old.
All right, seems good.
It's working. So I do have a question for you. Who here has built an Ember app that's more than a toy app? Raise your hand. Okay, and keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Now, put your hands down if you have not run into challenges with lists, with long lists of items. Okay, you're going to be a good audience for this talk.
So wait, everyone with their hand up ran into problems.
Yes, and they're the same people who built Ember apps.
Ah, seems good. All right. So, I am back. Where did this? So, it's kind of fun giving 2 talks a night. I like talking. If you knew me, you would know that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to unmirror here. So, I wowed you with my integration testing solution. Now I'm going to wow you with my incremental rendering solution, which I do not take credit for inventing. It's actually an old concept that people have done on the web for a long time. I just happen to be the second person to bring it to Ember, but the first person to bring it to Ember in an open source form. I'm just swapping out my slides here. So the first implementation that I know of basically something like the Ember.ListView was done by Chris Selden at Yap for their mobile app. And one day I was chatting, saying how we have this problem where it was when I was working at Square. And we made the terrible, terrible mistake of developing with a data set that was not representative of the data set that our customers would have. And so we built this really awesome feature in our application for letting clients manage their items, their like inventory, and it would like sync to the iPad and all that stuff. It's really cool. But it only worked with like 100 items, and then beyond 100 items, it took like many, many seconds to load and render. And that was the beginning of my spirit quest on Ember performance issues. And it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot working on performance. And if you ever get a chance, I really recommend taking some time to learn about how the web browser actually works, because it can really inform how you write your code and how you design your application. So I'm going to stop waxing poetic and start giving this talk. So, what the hell? Why isn't this working? Okay. All right. So yes, great. So I'm going to talk about Ember.ListView. As you may know, Ember is the premier JavaScript framework for integrating with Hadoop and MongoDB for web-scale big data applications. As you can see here by fellow core team member Tom Dale. This was a joke. It was a joke tweet that he promoted using the $50 of free money that Twitter gives you when you sign up for.
He also said the same phrase on multiple podcasts.
Yeah, this is the running Ember joke. If you know us, we just love to keeping this meme alive. But yes, so.
You say it enough, it becomes true.
Yeah, if you say, so that's right. Fake it until you make it, right? We're going to pretend like we're the premier JavaScript framework for big data, and then eventually we're just going to end up being one. Maybe what I'm going to talk about today is, and also what Andy was talking about, we're solving the big data problems, people. Throw Benjis at me. So everybody's talking about big data, but nobody's talking about big DOM. And this is a real problem. So thankfully, we have Ember.ListView to help us with big DOM. This is a t-shirt I want to get made. So there are a couple solutions that I know of to the big DOM problem. One of which is the most common one, and that's infinite scrolling. And everybody knows about infinite scrolling. I'm going to show you some examples. DOM reuse, though, is what the strategy that Ember.ListView takes. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So infinite scrolling. I'll show you a video on the next slide, but basically some pros and cons. Infinite scrolling is extremely simple to implement. Usually it means you have like a scroll event handler, and basically when you get to like 80% down the page, you trigger off an AJAX request, load more data in, and then render it, just append it to your list. But the problem with this is that if you're just doing a naive implementation, you're actually just you're just appending more and more data to the DOM, and eventually memory use will grow, and depending on the user's computer, it may get out of hand. It also breaks the scroll bar. This is actually one of the most frustrating things about Twitter, for me. At least, I'll get into that. I'll rant a little bit more about Twitter infinite scrolling in a second. And it's also hard to handle linking. Like, again, the naive implementation is that approach of like, basically as you scroll, just append stuff to the bottom. So how do you deep link into page, like, 4 or 5 pages down? You tend to, unless you want to deal with the complexity of implementing infinite scrolling upwards too, or like have some kind of sparse array type implementation where like you can actually jump the user down to the 5th page of content but have not loaded the data above it. It's just tricky, and actually I think it's not worth it. There are some use cases for infinite scrolling. Like if you actually have infinite data, then infinite scrolling is a good solution. But most people don't. So Twitter does actually have the infinite data problem on like your timeline, because basically, I follow, this is old, but I follow like 341 people. So like, there's probably 1 million or 2 million tweets. I bet you it's not even efficient for Twitter to tell you how many tweets you are actually visible by you, because those computations are too complicated. So as you're scrolling down, you get a spinner, and when you're trying to find a tweet from like yesterday, good luck, right? Like it's just impossible. And that really sucks. So DOM reuse though, this is what ListView does. The big win of DOM reuse is that, or it's not really a win of DOM reuse, but it's a win of the ListView. Now that I realize, after I gave this talk like 4 times, this slide is kind of not really accurate. But the scroll bar with ListView is actually representative of the content size. So when you load the page on OS X, new versions with the hidden scroll bar is actually like representative of, it's smaller when there's a lot of content, and you can just click and drag it randomly, or you can click the scroll bar, you can hit the end button. If you have an end button on your keyboard, pro tip, it is function right arrow on a Mac. I use it all the time, actually. The nice thing about DOM reuse is, since it's actually reusing DOM, and we'll talk more about what that exactly means, you actually don't need to have you're not actually putting all of the data into the DOM. You're actually just showing the visible stuff. You only have the visible content in the DOM at any one time. And we'll talk more about how that works. So there's a small DOM, so it actually renders faster initially, right? But it does introduce some design constraints, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. So this is actually the previously mentioned, this is part of the Square application. This is the section of Square dashboard called the items item section, and this is a video just of basically this is like the second version of the list view that I wrote. The idea is that you can each of these rows are expandable, so like you can have you have price points, so like small, medium, large, or something like that if you're selling coffee. So I think I might expand that. Or actually, I'm going to click edit. It's got this cool like side iPad-y type thing. We're going to create some price points. Isn't that awesome? I love the amount of polish we got to add to the Square application. So you can expand, and the rows actually have variable height here. And if you scroll it off and scroll it back, it actually remembers that it was expanded and renders it again. And I'll show you some videos so you can get an idea for how, why that's actually impressive. But So this is what's happening. This is a video of the elements inspector, and basically what you want to look at is there's only as many rows as are needed to fill the viewport, and as you scroll, we just actually are taking rows off the top. If you're scrolling down, we take rows off the top that are going off screen and put them at the bottom so that they come in. And there's like one extra row, so there's no gaps, basically. And so when you scroll up, they come off the bottom, go on the top. And this next video is going to be, I've just highlighted the first row, so it's obvious what is happening. So there it is, coming up from the bottom as you scroll. But again, there are, in this example, there are only actually 10, well, starting at 0, there are 11 rows in the DOM. That's it. And this is the current API for using it. It's actually it's going to be better. If you haven't realized, the Ember core team has high standards for API design, and there's a little too much configuration here, perhaps, but it's actually amazing. You just drop this into your application, and you can replace like a pound each with this, and you'll get this functionality just immediately. So I was talking a little bit about the constraints, the design constraints. Currently, the list view requires you to have fixed height rows. And that's because the idea is, since we're not rendering everything to the screen, if you're familiar with like UI table view or like, you know, native rendering of lists like this, you tend to have the constraint of needing to know what the height of rows are. It's kind of it's actually like the best thing about the web, that containers flow with they actually grow to the size of their content. So, and you can position them relatively. You don't need to constantly being like, this thing's 10 pixels tall, and start the next row at Y position 10, because, you know, you don't have to do that kind of layout, right? But yeah, so you have to know that the rows have to have a set height. You can extend it to deal with like row expansion, but the initial render needs to make it extremely performant, the rows have to be easily renderable without actually having to do the work of rendering all of them. So that can change though. There are some trade-offs. For example, the square list view, which was like the second iteration, and this is actually like now probably like iteration 5, and a lot of that work has been done by Yap recently. So thank you very much to them for taking the baton and doing the work that I didn't have the motivation to do myself. And they actually have, I'm going to talk more about some of the cool stuff that Yap's added to ListView a little later, but basically you have to know the height, and you have to know the height of the list area, and you have to know the row height. And then basically we just do the math. We're like, oh, you have 50 pixel high rows, you have a 500 pixel container, we're going to need to render 10 rows to fit the content area, and then we're going to add an extra one. So that as you're scrolling, there's not a blank gap, you know, as like one of the rows is halfway off the screen or whatever. So like I said, it's extensible. You can add your own behavior. Now, this is really exciting, and Yap saw this work through, so thank you very much. But now we actually support grids. So if you wanted to do like something like the RDO album view, you can do that with ListView now too. So we have support 2D grids. So this is kind of a simple example of, you know, a 2D grid. I whipped this together. This is like the 5th time I wrote ListView for the grid one. But now we've got it. It's all one package and same API. If you're interested in an incremental rendering solution for tables, Adapar, which has been a great supporter of Ember, has funded a lot of work by Tom Yehuda. They came up with a table solution that uses that will be using ListView, but was based off of an early version of the ListView code that I had shared, and that's kind of cool. I'm looking forward to their refactoring, which hopefully is going to happen soon. So there's a few things I would like to do to improve the API. The number one thing is to be able to somehow infer, well, I know how, but basically be able to infer the height and row heights based off of perhaps like rendering a row and measuring it first, and then using that to configure it. And then also inferring height, meaning like right now you have to specify what the height is of the list, but it could potentially infer it from its containing element. So so that way, like if you wanted the list to be the full size of your page, it would just assume the size of its containing element.
What we've done is we have a container that tells it its size, so then we don't add the dependencies in the list view itself, although maybe we want to merge those together.
So, so I had some items here that Yap took care of for me, which is awesome. I should say for us, because everybody gets benefit from this. Supporting row height changes while maintaining the scroll position. So the idea is like, you could be scrolled down in the list and you could actually like resize your window, and like if you made the window smaller, you might, what was 500 pixels tall might be 300 pixels now, and you want to be able to adjust the height of the list, but still keep your where you're scrolled to in view. Also layout support, that was basically grids. We're also going to, I think, work on supporting horizontal scrolling. Right now we only support vertical scrolling, but if you wanted to have like horizontal lists, you could do that potentially. Also, it'd be nice if right now there's some CSS. Basically, the list view is drawn with absolute positioning, as you could have perhaps inferred from this, the video. But basically, we're just changing top positions as you scroll of the rows. So there's some CSS, 5 or 6 lines, but it would be cool if that could just get injected and torn down automatically when the list view is rendered and torn down, so that you don't have to do that yourself. There has been a ton of optimizations. Oh my God, I am the first version. Well, the version that's currently shipping in the Square application, I'm really ashamed of now because it's so freaking slow compared to the current version. So I'm really pushing on them to upgrade so that I'm not embarrassed when I show it off. And I think that, so again, Yap, thank you so much for doing this work. And sparse arrays, I think, are the next evolution of this, where basically right now you have to have the list view assumes that you have all the data already. There's no hooks for loading it from the server. But I've actually started working on a sparse array that basically would, like if you were to jump, you might load the first 50 rows, kind of like the infinite scrolling type approach or a pagination type approach. But the idea is that if you like randomly jumped to the bottom, then I could go do a request for the visible rows plus some extra, perhaps. And I can actually, with Ember model, I can actually batch that into a single. The API is a little tricky, but the idea is we could potentially batch it into a single AJAX request instead of like, right now, the way that the API is, you're basically asking your controller for like a row at a time, but we can actually coalesce those into ranges of rows, which is a little tricky. But anyways, I won't nerd out too much. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff, let me know. You can use it today. It's been out for a while. I don't know, maybe a month and a half or so.
Every day it's getting like
and it's getting better and better and better, thanks to Yap. And Steph is doing a lot of the work. Luke has done a lot of the work, Ray Cohen. And I should mention the Godfather, Chris Selden, who basically, kind of did this on his own. And then I came along and was like, hey, I need to do, I've started doing this. And he's like, oh, I already wrote that. Like, he was very nice. I just mean it's just like, I thought it was amazing when I was writing it, and he's just like, yeah, I wrote that thing, whatever,
He was like, you actually did it all wrong.
Yeah. So I got some great ideas from him that went into the original implementation, and now Yap has done such a great job refactoring it and making it awesome. So let's do a live demo real quick. I will turn on mirroring. Actually, it's just Control F1 or Command F1. That's easy. Really? Windows. Who uses Windows? Apparently this guy. So we've got this little ListView page. So there's actually two ListView classes right now, ListView and then virtual ListView. And basically the difference is that ListView is more of like the desktop-oriented approach. I would like to see us kind of combine them at some point. It's just they work very differently, so it would be airing. Yeah, but they have the same API. So this is the ListView right here. So we got a thing of 10,000 items. It's pretty freaking fast. So let me just explain. I didn't really detail exactly what's happening, but as we scroll, we're moving the rows off and moving down, but we actually have to re-render the inside of that row with whatever is inside your template for the row, right? So like right now we're just displaying a simple property, but there could be images, there could be plenty of things inside of this. So the one caveat when you're dealing with ListView is that you need to be extremely performance conscious because if you want to maintain buttery, silky, smooth scrolling, you need to keep your scroll events to under 15 milliseconds. So that's kind of, actually, I'll show you. I will prove that we do this. So Chrome has this pretty cool feature called the timeline. If you do not use this, start using it today or tomorrow. It is amazing. And so basically, as we scroll this, we can see all the work that's being done here. I'm going to stop recording. So this is all the work that's happening as we scroll. There's a lot of work, wow, right? But look at this handy dandy filter. What's greater than 15 milliseconds? Nothing. That's how it's supposed to be. So if you're using ListView and you filter by greater than 15 milliseconds and there is something there, you should be conscious of it and try to make it faster so that your scrolling stays smooth. So that's ListView.
You should show the DOM as you're scrolling.
I showed a video of it, but yeah, I can show it here. So if you, I don't know. Oh, by the way, just FYI, another shout out to myself. Use this, Ember console utils, and get ready for your mind to be blown. So you saw that I right-clicked and inspected element, right? Did you know that if you type $0, you will have a reference to the inspected element? And if you type $1, you will get the previously inspected element. If you type $0, you get the previously inspected element. Now, what if I told you that if you use Ember console utils, you'll get $0 view, $0 controller, $0 template, $0 model, and you can basically debug your application light years faster than you could before. So, and it's yours for 3 easy payments of $19.99, or you can buy me a drink afterwards. And I will reveal the URL, which is already on the screen. Use this. You can conditionally include it in your development code and not ship it to production if you're worried about that kind of thing, if you're bite-size conscious. But it's awesome. Use it. That just came to mind as I right-clicked and hit inspect element, because it is amazing to me how many people don't know about $0, and it is literally one of the best pro tips you could give a JavaScript developer, I feel like, or an Ember developer, coupled with Ember console utils. So I was going to show, as Steph requested, this is actually using 3D transforms, but on desktop I don't think it really matters. On mobile it's nicer. So you can see
on desktop it lets you get any momentum you want.
Okay. Seems good. So yeah, you can see the DOM is staying there, but if I expand here, you can see there's the, you can see this item text is changing, right? So that's kind of what's happening under the hood.
What about the scroll bar to be a certain size?
So I hope this didn't change. So no, this one does. So see how, basically the idea is, this one? Okay, so it's like how I was originally. Basically there's a div that is the full height, and that causes the overflow div to have the scroll bar be that large. That's the hack. I call it the scrolling view. But yeah, so this thing's 500 pixels, 500,000 pixels tall, and that's what makes the scroll bar representative. So that's list view, but there's also virtual list view. What is virtual list view? Well, anybody tried to do mobile web application development? Have you ever tried to have like fixed headers or something like that? It is amazing, but that is actually extremely difficult. So let me show you in the iPad, the iOS simulator here. I think I've got it queued up still from yesterday. Whoa, that is a weird bug. So here's the same page. Here's the list view. This is the desktop, like this is the standard list view built for mouse events in the desktop. But it's actually using the, what is it, WebKit scroll something? Some CSS thing that iOS 6 or 5 added, and 6 made better, but not solved. So basically the idea is you get momentum scrolling. I don't know, like if you did this in iOS 4, basically when you had overflow divs, you had to two-finger scroll them. So basically we had the arms race for JavaScript scrolling libraries that felt like the native scrolling. Apple added in iOS 5 somewhat solved the problem. Then in iOS 6 solved it better, except there's a bug. Well, it's not a bug. They actually intentionally did it, I found out, because of performance concerns. So let's scroll this thing. What the fuck is going on? Wait for it. So basically, while the momentum is occurring, it does not it like stops doing anything until the momentum finishes. And then so we're still in this unfortunate ghetto world in the.
It works on new Android.
Yes, it works on new Android, but there's like, what, 100,000 people in the world with an Android 4 device, so doesn't help you on Android for the majority of Android users. But so here's virtual list view. As you may guess, this works amazingly well on touch devices. So basically, we are using a library, Zynga scroller, which is kind of interesting. It actually just handles dealing with the momentum math for you. And so, and I think from Yap's experience, this is like the best library out there for doing this kind of stuff. So we have it built in, integrated in the virtual list view. So if you're doing stuff on mobile or touch devices, we've solved that problem for you too. All right, what else am I going to talk about? Oh yeah, so.
You said something about it not destroying the state of if something's expanded or not. What is the performance implication of doing that?
So it actually doesn't do it right now because he deleted the code that did it, but it should soon. Basically, it had its own mechanism for preserving state inside of views, but we have item controller now in Ember, and so we want to basically utilize item controllers to preserve state across rows that have been scrolled off screen. So basically, the idea is when you scroll the row, off screen, its item controller still exists, and when it gets brought back on screen, the item controller just gets set back onto that row, and all the state will be preserved still. So one more thing, if you're interested in these kind of performance-y type things with Ember, I also wrote this thing called the group helper, which allows you to modify the granularity of DOM bindings. So if you've used Ember, you notice all the script tags, the metamorph script tags that are in the DOM. We use those to mark areas of your output that are bound. And the idea is sometimes in some applications, you may also have heard of unbound, the unbound helper, which is like if you never want to update that content, you don't need it to be bound, you can prefix unbound, and it'll just output it raw so that if that property changed, it would never update. But for performance reasons, that could be good. But actually, the group helper gives you the best of both worlds. And the way the group helper works is it basically says, it gives you, it's a block helper for handlebars, and you basically just wrap it, I'll just bring up the GitHub. Hopefully there's a decent, so like, you just wrap up area of your template in the group helper, and basically it says, if anything inside of here changes, re-render the whole grouped area. So the idea is like if you did it on a row, like for here, for this example, first name, last name, if first name changed, rather than just updating the area of the DOM that output, where first name was output, it would re-render both first name and last name. And the nice thing about this is that you don't pay the you don't have the overhead of doing the manual of doing the bindings for each property. It becomes basically like one bound property. So when you're doing like large lists, and you don't mind doing the work of re-rendering a larger portion of the DOM instead of a specific portion of the DOM, like that property only, you can actually reduce the framework's overhead of doing all the bookkeeping and tracking for that specific property and turn it into a larger group. So like if you're outputting first name, last name, street, whatever, let's say 5 properties, that's the overhead of 5 bindings, DOM bindings. And if you put a group around it, it's 1. So you can imagine how you can get significant performance improvements because of that. So yeah, check that out. Q&A.
At the bar.
At the bar, I guess. Are we running that late? Yeah.
You mentioned that as you scroll, you're rebinding the views.
Yeah.
If you have a heavy view, that might...
Yes. Yes. So you need to be conscious of how heavy your views are. Like,
do you support the ability to delay that until the scrolling stops?
Not currently, but you could actually do that yourself pretty easily, I would imagine.
We're working.
Oh, you're actually pretty close?
We also have a way of preserving the entire view if you have like a homogeneous collection so that you don't rebuild the view. You just
yeah, so there's some strategies for actually, so I actually did that at Square. Basically, the idea is you might have shared DOM, but you want to so right now the list view re-renders the whole row, basically. It tears down and re-renders everything. But if the DOM is basically the same, you could only change the specific parts that are changing. And so Yap has been working on making that easier.
There's a reusable list item you get.
Yeah, so.
As of 1 a.m. last night, it's in.
So that kind of stuff. So you can like basically just pay the cost of updating the exact content rather than all of the DOM. But again, when it comes to performance, you've really just got to you've got to really be conscious of what you're doing. And so if you're building an application that needs to be extremely performant and has big data or big DOM, you need to do the work to really think these things through. And if you need help, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happily willing to, help coach you through the problems potentially. So, yeah.
So is there a reason why you didn't use something like DOM caching?
What do you mean by DOM caching?
So instead of having to re-render the view, just pull the DOM out and just cache it. Just hold on to it. And then when you're ready to throw it back, you just throw it back.
Well, the problem is that the level of abstraction is at the view, and you can't guarantee that the DOM is actually the same. You could have list items that have completely different templates. So that's why Steph said when it's homogeneous, thank you. Homogeneous, I never can pronounce that word right. If it's a homogeneous list where all of the DOM, where the DOM is mostly the same or completely the same, then you can just change the pieces of it that are different.
So it's just in case.
So that's basically doing what you're talking about. But the API it's actually, you don't have to.
Was retaining the entire list item view in memory and then reinserting it afterwards.
Oh, you're saying like are you saying like actually just remove the node, remove the row from the DOM, but keep it in memory?
Yes.
Well, that doesn't scale when you have large data sets.
Well, because at Huffington Post Live, we did something exactly like that. We used a library called Infinity from Airbnb. I don't know if you're aware of it. They do exactly what you guys are doing, except that they're re-rendering the
row, you just save it.
Yeah, so yes, but the problem is that if you have a million rows, you run out of memory eventually. Yeah. Well, in Chrome perhaps. Okay. All right. So I don't know. Maybe that's possible. But the point was that it may not be acceptable on, for example, mobile to have 300 megabytes of DOM nodes sitting in memory. What's that? Okay, sure. But yes, but
if it really works, we should add it as another strategy.
You should help us out and edit.
You should take a look at their implementation.
What is it called again?
It's Infinity from AirDNA.
Okay.
It's open source. And the other thing is that they actually...
The other thing though is that re-rendering actually is really cheap. So yeah, I mean depending on what your rows are, right?
If the view is particularly heavy, then like each individual row is
Sure.
very heavy, that re-rendering is actually not as cheap.
Yeah.
Like you have to keep it under the 15 seconds, 15
Yeah.
milliseconds, right?
Yeah. So I would just say like our approach is definitely going to be lower memory than that.
The other thing is that they support pre-pending and appending. Do you guys?
What do you mean by that?
We can insert at any point, anytime.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can even dynamically change the width and height and everything we flows with minimum renders and use 3D transforms.
All right.
Cool. Eric, thanks so much. Good stuff. Hey, thank you all for coming out. Thank you for the speakers for all really outstanding set of talks tonight. We are back here May 23rd for the next incarnation. Hacker Hours, we think, are Tuesday night. Definitely Tuesday night. It'll be on the Meetup site. And we're going to Central Bar, which is on East 9th between...
Luke, do they have karaoke there?
No, but there may be a post-Central Bar karaoke outing.
Right by St.